he's strong and he keeps kosher. He has he could do it all, you know. And these boys have contact with Rudy, and they could be his friend, and he could be their friend. So I said, Rudy, they need you more than you need them. You could get tefillin on demand. You can go on the internet and get it shipped to you with a credit card in a minute, and your father would pay for it. If you tell your father you want the $5,000 pair of tefillin, the most mahudud pair I know that exists today, he'll get it for you. You want 2 pairs, your father will get it for you. Or even you could afford it. But these boys need you more than you need them. So in the case of Deborah Feldman, who grew up in a very closed Hasidic group, I didn't have that. I had the luxury of Chabad that I could travel the world. And I explained this to Rudy. I said, Rudy, I traveled the world and I never learned a thing because people were talked to me and I never had the education to understand what people are saying. And he asked me today, Peter Himmelman, very cool guy, friend of Simon Jacobson, the musician, he asked me about Shalom Din, and I said if Shalom Din was Lubavitch, he wouldn't have a book, meaning he wouldn't have a book to write. Some people went to his thing in San Diego, some Lubavitchers, modern Chabad light, and they said to him, if you were in Chabad, you wouldn't have a book to write because Chabad is an open group, an open religious system. There are many closed aspects of it. I remember a wonderful story about the Keller from Kiddush HaChodesh. He wrote the book on Kiddush HaChodesh. He's got the pointy beard. And he saw me and my friend, who was a very fine bacher in yeshiva. We were both fine boys. We were in the library. And he rushed over to the section we were, and he looked at the books we were looking at, and some magazines. We were looking at some nature magazines. And I looked to see, what is he looking? What is he worried about? Maybe we're looking at some magazines with women in bikinis or something cosmopolitan and stuff like that. I never understood that there was this, it's not anti-women. Because that makes sense, you know, you got to be clean, you got to be, it made sense, and you're going to get married, you got to love one woman, so it makes sense, you shouldn't be looking around, and you shouldn't be indulging. But I didn't know that this was an anti-education, but they couldn't be honest about it. Because once they be honest about it, the first thing you want to think about is education. You'll always run to it. You'll see a scientist, you'll ask questions, tell us more, tell us about science. You see a philosopher, tell us about philosophy. So, one of the things she mentions in her book is Yerusha, a little chapter called Yerusha, and I like that chapter. Yerusha, about going through her grandmother's things. Her grandmother, and I spoke about this today, going through her grandmother's stuff, and then Yerusha, and beautiful chapter in the book on Exodus. I remember going through my grandmother's stuff in her apartment in Washington Heights, and I found a photo of my mother in free shoulders, sleeveless shoulders, and a dress in Ukraine, where my mother grew up, or Lvov or Tashkent, I'm not sure where it was. And then I went back home and I told my mother what I found, and it's amazing, I never got to see these things. And my mother said to me in Yiddish, "I darf nicht halten a solche Bilder." Just to, in short, to speak about that, I'll tell you this. In the book Monuments Men, where it's a movie based on the book, they go into a big warehouse full of art, and the guy asks this actress, who's beautiful, I forgot her name, and the guy asks her, "What's all this in the warehouse?" You know, it's people's pictures, family, everything confiscated by the Nazis. And there's Eisenhower and Patton looking at some Nazi looted art, but mostly it was people's lives. And she answers the question. They go, "What is all this?" And he goes, "People's lives, people's heritage. Something so precious can be washed away by a religious system, a complete nonsense." And my mother, and of course our family, and I got cousins in Yerushalayim that did the same thing to these old black and white pictures of our great aunts and stuff, coloring black on the photos, and of course defacing something so sentimental and valuable. There were no digital cameras. There's not all these videos that we could take in a heartbeat and throw it out and make another one. And we would deface it because it wasn't tznius. Who was responsible for this? The Rebbe. So that's all. So he asked me, Peter asked me today about, I said to him, you know, the Rebbitzin wanted to give me and my friend some chocolate, but we weren't allowed to go and speak to her, go up into the house on President Street, and I showed him a photo in the book Rebbe by Hillman and Friedman of the book Rebbe. You could see the Rebbitzin were here, and you could see Chana Garari and how they were modern, and I said and we weren't allowed to, but I never knew why. But I had an aunt in Washington Heights, my mother's brother's wife at the time, and she wanted to invite me for Shabbos, and she didn't cover her hair. She didn't wear the sheitel. It wasn't in her tradition. She was Georgian, Gruzinia. She spoke Yiddish, which was very warm, and she wanted to invite me. My parents didn't let, and I got older. I asked my mother, why didn't you never let me go? And she said, because you shouldn't learn bad things from them. Imagine that. Imagine how far you can fall down the rabbit's hole. You shouldn't learn bad things from them. The Rebbetzin and Chayamushka couldn't give me and my friend chocolate because she couldn't contaminate the community because she was modern and she didn't cover her hair. Imagine that. So she would wave to us from the second floor window, and I was, wow, the Rebbe's wife. I thought Brad Pitt, and Angelina Jolie, the feeling, you saw them in Palm Springs, you go, wow, look what we just saw today. But it was more than that. There was this deep religious feeling. And she couldn't give us the chocolate, but she would give it to other people who were lucky, who were more elites, blue bloods in the system. But I explained this to Peter Himmelman, who was, he's been 30 years in Chabad, going in and out, coming, enjoying Crown Heights, and I said to him, you can always come to Crown Heights and go home. You have the luxury, but when you see all these kids, these rent-a-crowds, hundreds of kids who are never going to have the luxuries that you have to have some empathy for them. And that's back to the story in the link that I'll share you through below. You need to watch it, review it, you need to understand the problem, and then you can understand the solution by going over it very carefully. Thank you for watching. Good Shabbos.